All right, everybody, my name is Dante Houston, and today's Austin School lecture series is going to be on the Black intellectual and Western society. And what we're really going to focus on is understanding why anti-intellectualism is so prevalent in the Black community. I know a lot of people are just like, what's the deal with that? What's going on? There has to be something there. I'm going to actually discuss that with you, and hopefully we can have some good questions afterwards and we can go forward with that. So to tell you guys a little bit about myself, so my name is Dante Houston. A little backstory on me. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm from Austin. I was at Austin Community College and transferred to Southwestern. I'm now a philosophy major there, and hopefully on to grad school afterwards, where I'll do a lot more of these. I'm a former student of Casa Grande, so I totally understand the situation you're in. You're learning some cool stuff, and you also get some extra credit, so that helps. So to get started, I was what you would call a Black intellectual growing up in school. But the problem with intellectualism, as we see it here in America, is that with the Black society, they don't mesh. They don't really mesh. Quite frankly, in the Black community, intellectualism equals whiteness. So with that, what you find is that there isn't a discouragement of reading books. There isn't a discouragement of going to school or anything like that. What happens is when you start to read and you start to learn more, you start to speak different because you're more informed. You're more well-versed than you were prior to reading. What comes out of your mouth once you're more well-learned is a different vocabulary, usually a different tone, and usually a different way of articulating things. And for someone in the Black community that isn't familiar with that type of rhetoric or discussions that you're now bringing up because you're now well-learned, it sounds as if you're becoming white. So the question would be, well, what's wrong with that? Why is that an issue? Because in the United States, we spent a long time convincing people of color that they weren't American and they weren't true Americans. You know what I'm saying? Like they weren't equal. So when you hear someone in your community, someone that you raised or someone that you grew up with, starting to talk like that, you start to assume that they are going to start developing the same traits that come along with that type of that talk. Okay, he's going to start looking down on his people because we don't read or whatever the case may be. So that's where the anti-intellectual kind of starts, and we're going to kind of delve deeper into that. So I'm going to start off with my own personal story. Again, like I told you, when I was in school, I was intellectual, or at least I didn't know it at the time, but I was fairly smart, a little bit above average student. And I started to do really well on the tax test. That's what it was called back when I was in school. I graduated high school in 2008, so I'm a little older. I did well on the tax test. In 1 year, I believe it was the English test, I received 100 on it. And my teachers were astonished, not just because the grade was high, but because of how I acted in class. They assumed that I wasn't retaining any of the information. I barely did any homework. And the question is, okay, well, why weren't you doing any work? Obviously you did learn something. You were paying attention. I would go home and read the stuff. I just wouldn't do the work. And that's because when you are a kid, you want to fit in, obviously. And for us, fitting in was not being the smart guy. You didn't want to be the smart guy. You didn't want to be the person that was trying to become white. So I was put into a AP class when I was in middle school, and then I did okay. That lasted for a little bit, and then eventually I got kicked out of it. The reason why I got kicked out of it was because my grades started to slip when I got into that class. Now, the question is, well, Dante, maybe you weren't as smart as you thought you were. Maybe you couldn't handle it. The good thing is I remember exactly why I wanted to be out of that class. The reason why is because this school was about roughly, I want to say, 60 to 70% Black. This is in Southwest Houston. And when I was put in that AP class, I was one of maybe 2 Black people in that class. So think about this perspective from a kid's point of view. I'm taken out of a class with my friends, right? I'm put into an environment, well, not only that, the environment that I was previously in was obviously easy for me. I was doing pretty well there as far as being able to just show up and do the test or whatever the case may be. So now the work is harder. I'm in an environment where I'm not familiar with any of these people. They obviously have seen me around school, so they obviously have views for me, rightly so. Obviously, I was a bit of a class clown to try to fit in. So now the work is harder, and now I'm in a setting where no one really can relate to me. And when I step out of this classroom, I'm no longer the friend. Oh, that's the smart guy. So when you're talking about kids who are not old enough to make mature decisions, who are able to think like, oh, this is AP classes are good, I'm going to go to college if I do well in this stuff, I'm thinking it from the perspective of a 12, 13-year-old. So I did everything I could to show them that I did not belong in that class, if I even went to class, because I felt uncomfortable. And that is both a cultural and a society thing. It's basically where this discussion is going to go, because, well, how do you change that? On one hand, I'm dealing with two issues. The outside world, whereas I go into this class, these other students obviously don't see me as their equal. And on the other hand, since I left my friends who were no longer in this class that I was in, I was seen as the sellout. I remind you, when you take that kid and you put him in these AP classes, he's still going back to the same neighborhood. He's still riding the bus with the same people. These kids that he grew up with or are friends with, he's known them for a long time. He or she has known them for a long time. So it can be I wouldn't use the word traumatizing because that's a bit strong, but it can be a very uncomfortable setting for a kid to be in. Also, you got to lose the perspective that you have now currently as an adult, where you would say, again, that's AP classes, man. Like, that's obviously important. It looks good on a college resume. It's going to make you a smart person. We're not thinking like adults like we would think now. We're thinking from the perspective of a 12 to 13-year-old kid who just wants to be comfortable in he or she's own setting, right? So this discovery that I'm telling you about, this story, is something that I didn't realize was a pattern well until I was in the military and I was on my way out and I was going back to school. Because when I was in the military, I was surrounded by, I did pretty well on the military exam, and I got put into a battalion where I basically worked for the NSA, and I had a top secret clearance, and I did that for 5 years. I deployed to Afghanistan for about 8 months, did that, came and trained people to do the same work that I did in Afghanistan in the embassy. So a lot of these people that I was in the military with, my battalion members, a lot of them have gone on to Harvard or Brown, really smart individuals. And I was around them for a while, and I was one of the few black people in the battalion, and I couldn't understand what separated me as a black male or a black person in general from all these other people when I'm obviously as intelligent. And I went back and I looked at my culture and the way society views my culture and vice versa. That was the distinguishing factor. The problem with our education system now currently is that it relies on 12 to 13-year-olds who probably don't have the structure at home to make a decision, an executive decision that me or you will be able to make in our 20s or late teens. But they're required to make these decisions 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't trust a 16-year-old about anything, even the 16-year-old that I would have raised, So that's the problem and the issues that we're seeing. Now, a little perspective, on maybe the problem in the culture. And I want to be clear, I am declaring that there is a problem with black culture, but I will be critical of society as well. So everybody's going to get some today. But I will start off with my own culture. There is a problem with black culture. But to understand the problem, you have to understand where it came from. You're talking about the only culture within the United States that from the moment that it stepped foot on American soil was treated as less than even second or third rate. We're talking about people who were denied home loans, so they were never allowed to buy a home and build wealth over generations. A lot of people don't know buying a house is very important, not just because you get to get a home, because usually you can sell it for a high value or you can pass it down to a kid, and that builds wealth over time. Black families were denied this. So all of these different things, when you deny people a certain place in society, they start to reject society as a whole. And when you think about it, think about this. When you think about black culture, it is literally antithetical to everything like popular culture is. Yet popular culture derived a lot of its stuff from black culture. So really, to be black in America is to be, in a sense, a rebel. Think about it. No one else sags. No one else. When you think about music, and music is actually a prime example. Rock and roll, blues, all of that stuff was rebellious for the time that it came out. People were listening to violins, classical music, and all of a sudden you hear this loud guitar that's just loud and obnoxious and just powerful. That started with a lot of black artists in the ghettos. Blues, all of these things that evolved. Look at hip hop, what it is now, what it started and what it is now. All of these things started from a rebellious nation. Now, am I saying that black people are the only people that are able to create new things? False. You study anything like modern art history, you'll find that a lot of painters, a lot of the styles that we now revere today, when they first were introduced, people thought they were crazy. Why are you painting a woman nude? That's ridiculous. That's unbecoming, right? Now we see a naked picture of anybody. We're just like, oh, that's beautiful, depending on what it looks like, right? We no longer care about those type of things. But those people had to take themselves out of society in order to create these types of new styles. What I'm saying about black people is that we didn't necessarily go outside of society. We were forced outside of society, of social conventions. So when we created things, they were in themselves rebellious because that is what black people do. You see what I'm saying? Oh, rock and roll, that's rebellious. That's what black people do. And it sounds totally different from what the elites do. So those are things to think about when you think about what it means for black people to be themselves in America. Is to be rebellious, to wear your hair. Just think about it. For a black person to wear their hair naturally, that's actually like a statement. If I walked anywhere with an afro, most people are like, oh, this guy's pro-black. He's like, if I had like a pick in my hair, think about that. That is just me wearing my hair naturally. But that is a rebellious statement in our society. So that's me telling you that just being black and being comfortable in your own skin and, that is rebellious in America. Still in 2016, it's provocative, And in a sense, the provocative is always what amazes people. So I'm going somewhere with this. To be black is to be rebellious. If that applies to entertainment, if that applies to music, why wouldn't it apply to academia? Why wouldn't it apply to the black intellectual? For me, my rebellion was not saying that I wasn't in that class thinking that I wasn't smart enough to be there. I was in that class thinking that it wasn't worth me being there. What am I going to do? If this class is anything like the rest of society, if I continue down this path, if I continue down a path of trying to be a very smart person, reading books and doing all this other stuff, I'm going to be completely surrounded by people that don't look like me. And not only do they look like me, worse than that, they don't understand me or where I come from at all. When I was in the military, I would get questions from friends, and these were like real honest questions. They had like no malice towards me or anything like that. A lot of the time, these came from people who I considered real best friends and people who, to this day, I would still take a bullet for in combat. Why do black people like big rims? Why do black people like shiny paint? Why do black people like, all of these different things? Because we literally don't understand people that we see every day. Think about this. Another interesting thing. Outside of Native Americans, who we can all admit we treated very horribly, and I would argue today we still do, white Europeans, of the English variety at least, and French, and black people have been here the longest as far as what this nation has become. How is it possible that me, knowing that let's say, I don't remember the exact date that slavery ended, but I want to say it was in the 1800s when they stopped bringing slaves in, not ended, but stopped bringing slaves in. So that means I've been in this country at least since then. At least my family has. So we go back to the colonial days, right? Yet it's very rare for you to see someone that's black and patriotic. And the black experience it's not really a pro-American experience. Imagine that. And you have people who are second, third generation from Europe and have totally assimilated, and you wouldn't be able to tell whether they've been here, their family's been here 200 years or 30. You wouldn't be able to tell. So is it just because black people wake up one day and decide that we wanted to be different? I don't think that's the case. That just goes to further show that America itself has made it a priority to make sure that African Americans don't feel as American as everyone else. Now, I'm not just here to bag on white Americans, because to be quite honest with you, white Americans are suffering because of these thoughts as well. It is really the white elite who created these notions of race and embedded these notions of race in the notion of class itself. So when we see someone of color, we don't assume that they are of higher class, maybe middle class at best, until they show us otherwise, right? So the problem with the poor whites is that they bought into the system because the white elites made it beneficial for them to say, hey, these blacks are taking your factory jobs. These people are coming in and taking your jobs, and they're not even, they're lesser. They're not educated. And all of this is a greater discussion on how, when people are forced out of a system, are at every turn treated as though they are not a part of this American dream that we all believed in. How is it confusing to us now here in 2016 that there's still signs of the black culture trying to deal with that, trying to overcome that, trying to, be more proud to be an American? It's hard to be proud to be an American when you also have to be proud of the things that created the society, which involved the rough treatment of the people that you come from. That's hard. So that's the problem. That's the problem with society, is that we view things as such as academic pursuits as being white, and because of it, we stray away from it. If I tell you, okay, here's a good scenario. I tell you that I raise you, right, as a servant or whatever. Totally hypothetical, not real. Please don't be offended. And I treat you terribly. I beat you every day. I catch you trying to read. I beat you. If I catch you using a word that I know I didn't teach you, I beat you, all of this stuff, right? Eventually, you go off and you have your own family for whatever reason. You escape my terrorizing style of captivity for you, and you go on and you raise a family. Now, you hate me, right? Obviously you would. I would imagine you would, especially if I was horrible to you all the time. There's no Stockholm Syndrome here, but I was never nice. You hate me, right? And not only that, we look distinctively different, right? My family is black as night. Your family is white. When you have kids, right, and you catch them doing things that remind you of me, what do you think you're going to do? Or how do you think you're going to react? That's a rhetorical question. I'd imagine I'm pretty sure I got your answer. You're going to make sure that your kids turn out nothing like me. Your whole life, you associated things like reading, writing, certain words, certain tones, certain way of speaking, certain way of carrying yourself as your oppressor, right? You don't want your kids to be anything like me. You haven't associated the things like reading and writing with success at all, because you've never experienced that. For you, there was no success at all. There was only a denial of success. And the people that were successful used these tools against you. Why would you ever want to teach them to your children, right? So that is just that. Eventually we got over that. But now let's think about the 1960s and we talk about the Civil Rights Act. That was really the last time we had a law that was like, okay, everybody's equal legally. Obviously, people created policies that kind of went around that and affected certain demographics a lot different than it affected others. We won't talk about that. We'll just talk about when, the law came out that just everybody was equal, civil rights, desegregation of schools, all of that stuff, 60s, right? We settled that. We're not even 60 years away from that. Why would anyone expect the people who were most affected by that to all of a sudden to be fixed? You know, if somebody's beating your child, right, and they have a rough childhood, you don't expect them to ever be what we consider normal at any point, because they had an experience that transformed their very self, their very notion of reality. Prime example, I grew up with this. My grandfather and my mother and my grandmother would always tell me things like, boy, don't ever get caught up in jail because those white folks want you to be arrested. They want you in the system, right? That sounds like the conspiracy theory nowadays, right? But they really believe this. And they pass this belief onto their children because they actually experienced it for whatever, they experienced it. They experienced the police dogs, the water hoses that rip your flesh off because they're at such a high speed. They experience these things. So they're going to try to tell their kids, hey, watch out because the white man wants you to suffer, wants to do these things to you like they did unto us. Don't believe these laws that they pass, yada, yada, yada. That is still passed down, and there's still black men and women my age who believe this wholeheartedly. It is not something that is a conspiracy theory to them, because they can actually go pick up and look at video and pictures of these things happening, or they remember sitting on their grandfather's lap and him telling them what happened to him, So again, we know these things to be true. Our grandparents went through these things. Some people, their parents went through these things. So it's not like this is something that happened 100 years ago, right? So why would anybody expect these people who went through these experiences to somehow be healed? Oh, you're equal. Why don't you just get over it? Like, it's over with. These happen to people that you love. Imagine how you would feel about Nazis or anything that resembled Nazis. If your mother had been a Holocaust survivor, or your grandfather had been a Holocaust survivor, or your great-grandfather, and you had experience meeting this person, like they impacted your life before they passed away. Anything that resembles Nazism, you're going to fight against like hell. Not because you just don't want it to happen to you, because you also have a deep hatred for it, or maybe not as deep as the person that went through it, because of someone you love explaining to you what they went through, right? That's only natural. These are only natural things. So again, why am I talking about all these bad things that happen to African Americans? What is my point? Is to make people feel bad? No, not at all. It's to make you understand what we as a community are trying to deal with internally. Now, the next question would be like, well, why does it have to be internal? Why do black people have to feel like they have to do it on their own? They won't accept outside help. Well, I think it's kind of obvious at this point why we don't accept outside help. Prime example. I can't remember where this happened. I believe it happened in either South Carolina or North Carolina. And if any of you guys know, please feel free to speak up. Black men, when they went to the doctors, if they had syphilis, were purposely not treated so that the doctors, could see how this virus worked. Right? They purposely didn't help them out or cure. They told them that, hey, we're working on it, yada, 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 or they told them that they did something, but they didn't do anything. So when they kept coming in and checking in, they was using black men as basically as guinea pigs, as part of an experiment. Well, what are the effects of that today? Well, I can tell you for sure that my grandfather did not want to go to the doctor ever. He had to be on his deathbed before he went to the doctor. He just wouldn't do it. He didn't trust doctors at all, no matter what they look like, to be quite honest with you. If he found a black doctor, maybe he'd be okay with it, but he just didn't. Because when that happened, he was a young man. He was in his teens. So he remembers vividly what this was. So that's one of many reasons why it's so hard for anyone outside of the black community to speak on the black community. Even if you're right, we're not trying to hear it, because we have hundreds of years of experience of where, when we not only had to listen to you, we were forced to listen to you, what the results were of that. And our only experience of taking up for ourselves, standing up for ourselves and going out there and making things happen with the civil rights movement, which there were other people who were not black who were in that and were very big in that movement. That was when we finally got some type of equal rights, at least under the eyes of the law, legally speaking. So what it's going to take, because I don't like to talk about anything if I don't have a solution. What I think it's going to take is it's going to actually take people, at least people that look like me, maybe not just people like me, but people that look like me, to stand up and to turn to our community, not at the expense of getting people outside of my community excited about, because then you look like a guy who's siding with the enemy. So you have to be, it's a very delicate situation. So it takes people like me who look like me to come in and say, okay, I understand what you're going through because I am you. I am a part of this community. We got to find a way to get our kids excited about school in a way that they're not excited about at all whatsoever. If you do, the ramifications for doing bad on the test in the black community is not the same as you would find in any other community. And if you for whatever reason you think that this is like me trying to explain some BS and it's not a real good explanation, look at African immigrants who come into America and how well they do in school. They do very well, especially Nigerians, because we get a lot of immigrants from Africa from Nigeria do very well in American institutions, just as well as you will find with Asian Americans who come over to America who do well at our institutions. That is an immigrant thing. The immigrants who come here want to work hard because they believe in the American dream, even though a lot of us who live here have completely think it's BS. So it's not some genetic thing, all right? We literally have a problem with valuing education. Now, I will say that the tide is turning on that. You're starting to see more black educated people ever. And I think it's going to become a trend where being an African American and going to high school or going to college right after high school is going to be a thing that you do. Right now, for our community, that wasn't like a thing. My parents taught me growing up, as long as you graduate high school, that's all we care about. Why was that? Is because they didn't think college was important? No, but it's because they never graduated high school. So in my family, you're literally seeing, like I have two kids, they're young, 5 and 3 months, but I'm going to preach to them college. Go to college, get an education. I don't care if they tell you about all this debt. That's fine. Everybody has debt. At least you're on equal footing, all right? So go to college. And then hopefully they teach their kids something new that I never discovered growing up because of my situation. So we, as an African-American community, we have a lot of issues that we need to face. Some of them are our own, and they're going to be handled internally, hopefully with the right type of leadership. But society has a responsibility too. Society has a responsibility to do exactly what you guys here are doing. Listen. Listen. Listen and not think that you know the answer for the black community. Because I'm a man, right? I don't know a damn thing about being a woman. I can support a feminist movement. I can support women equals right, equal pay. But in no way should I ever get up and act as though I'm a woman and I understand the discrimination that women go through. At no point in time should I ever stand up and say, well, I have a sister who was sexually assaulted. I know what it's like. No, I don't. Not at all. That wouldn't be fair. I don't have a view on pro-choice or pro-choice or pro-life. I don't have a view on that. I'm a man. I can't have a kid. I don't have like a real view. I don't have any experience. I don't know what that decision is like. My body doesn't change whenever there's a pregnancy. I'm just kind of here like, well, what do I do? You need water. Like, we're men, we don't understand that. That is an issue that I think personally men shouldn't even be a part of. It should be a discussion that women have, women discuss. Because when you let someone who is not experienced, no matter what their intentions are, there's a chance that they could mess it all up for the people who know what it's actually like to bear a child, to be in labor, to either have a child and have the person that got you pregnant be supportive or have the person not be supportive. So I'm saying that because that's the analogy I'm going to use for the black community. I'm not saying that you can't speak on issues or that you can't support them. But understand, like, you wouldn't want a man to speak on behalf of women everywhere about any type of women's rights, equal pay, or any of that, regardless of what his message is, in my opinion. He should probably just sit down and listen and support. I think that's what we got to do for everybody, no matter what the demographic is and what their issue may be. So, to wrap everything up, anti-intellectualism is a problem in Black communities, but I think we kind of know why now as I went through it. I use my own experience, what I went through, what I saw people in my family go through. I think it is valid, and I think it is valuable to those who may not understand why we see this type of lifestyle in the Black community. We don't think that we can survive in a world that is predominantly white, so we try to survive in our own. Unfortunately, that world that has been created for us and we're told to stay in is a world of drugs, bad housing, little to no health care, bad education systems. So we've decided that if we can't be a part of that and be treated equal, well, we're going to be treated equal here amongst ourselves in this cesspool of things that destroy us. So with that being said, I think we should go into the questions part of this. Am I good on time? 35 minutes? I think that's enough. There's not much more I can say than I've already said. Any questions? Got a mic?
Okay, so with all of the shootings that we've seen this year, I think most white people are just as appalled by that as anybody else. Yeah. The vast majority anyways. But I don't think many of us know what sort of active things we can do to protest against that or to try to overturn stuff like that that's happening. And in your talk today, you kind of seem to imply that some of that stuff should, the problems of the Black community should just be left to the Black community and white people should just stay out of it. Is it as simple as us just, being concerned about it, or is there more that we can do?
No. And I thank you for posing the question the way you did, because it gives me time to clarify what I really mean. Because I was afraid of that. Again, I'm not saying that anybody should stay out of anything in a sense of not caring or not feeling helpless about a situation. What I'm saying is you cannot fix the problem without the people who are suffering from the problem, who are part of the problem, being the focal front of that, right? If I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go back to feminism because I feel like it just connects so well. If I'm going to talk about anything dealing with women's issues, and let's say I'm going to create a panel, right? Would it make any sense for me to have a panel of all men, mostly men, right? At the very least, it should be majority women at the very least, if not all women, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. So I'm not saying that, does that mean I don't care? No. I should go to the panel. I should go and listen. Because these are things that I may need to tell my daughter one day, Hey, look, I don't know what women deal with, but I went to a panel and I heard a lot of women talk about serious issues that they were obviously very emotional about and very important to them. And this is what I learned as a man. Hopefully you can take something from it. And also think about this. If you are a white American, whether you actually know it or not or feel it or not, you hold a considerable amount of power in the eyes of other white Americans. So if you stand up and you say, look, I may not understand this issue completely because I haven't went through it, but these people up here, although they're different from me, their reasons are valid. What they're saying is important and what they're saying matters. So it's no different than, say, a white protester in the Black Lives Matter movement. You're not going to be the one to grab the microphone and stand up and talk in front of everybody. But you should be there. You should be there saying the chants too. You should be there showing up in solidarity. You should use the information you get in there to decide on how you're going to vote. So that's just the way that I see it. And as far as I think the first part of your question is, how do we deal with the fact that, or my idea that maybe African Americans should take ownership of that. Is that what it? Yeah. Yes, should, very much so. It should be on us, because here's the deal. somebody white comes into my community saying you guys need to stop shooting each other, it's a bit hypocritical. And the reason why it's hypocritical is not because you shot anybody that's black. It's because very few white people stand up to a system that criminalizes black people for things that aren't even violent. And then they go into jail, right? And then what happens to these people that are locked up in jail? Well, I can tell you from my experience of being in the military, and I wasn't even locked up, being confined to a certain structure of environment. You become more violent than you would normally be. So imagine you send somebody that wasn't a violent person, they were just selling weed, trying to support their family, because the only job they can get is a McDonald's job. And we all know that you can't feed anybody on a McDonald's job. You can't even wipe your own ass with a McDonald's job these days. Now that person's in an environment, hyper-violent lifestyle, they have to protect themselves, they have to be on edge. They come out with PTSD. Now you have released these people back into society more violent than they ever were. You know? So how could somebody that's a white American who hasn't stood up for these issues and said, we are incarcerating people and people are profiting off of it, come into my community and say, you black people should stop killing each other? The best thing you can do, I think, the most effective thing you can do as a white American is saying, how can I use myself as a platform to help you guys get where you want to be at? Same way a male should do it to a female. What can I do as a male in society that has certain privileges that you don't have? How can I use my platform to further your agenda? Because I believe your agenda is an honorable agenda, a right agenda. You know, we have to understand this whole idea that everybody's equal. We got to totally get rid of that. That's just not true. I mean, we all know that, right? Like this whole idea that we treat everybody equal, or that everybody has equal platform, or that everyone has equal rights is totally not true at all. You know, it's just not. It's just not. You go and look at music, for example. Look at. That's a little too complicated. Think about how people feel when someone is white, does something that is typically reserved for black people. That person is like celebrated, right? You know, like that person is like, oh shit, like Eminem is the greatest rapper of all time. Like, you know, like, come on, like Eminem's great, don't get me wrong. But, and not just to pick on him, or Iggy. You know, Iggy Azalea, like, you know, there's a certain, they can relate. It's not even a thing of people being racist. Is that if I'm a white person and I enjoy hip hop music or R&B or whatever the case, that's normally a predominantly black dominated genre, right? And I enjoy that genre, right? How excited would I be if I find somebody that looks like me that can do that genre pretty effectively, still has the same feeling, but looks like me? I emotionally connect more. That doesn't make me a racist. We all live vicariously through these stars. So when I see someone that kind of looks like me, it validates that I can be a part of this too. So we all go out and buy that person's CD, because now I can listen to this in my car and not feel like a poser, right? Because we put stuff in categories. Like black people listen to rap, white people, if they do listen to rap, they listen to Eminem, or they listen to like one of the most popular artists. They don't do underground, you know, or they'll look. And we kind of getting away from that as a society. I would agree. We are getting away from that. But there's just a difference there. You can relate more. So your power, I don't know if you're a white male. I don't know. Are you? Okay. Your power as a white male, your ability to connect people who would otherwise be uncomfortable, say, oh man, I want to kind of support Black Lives Matter, but I don't know. You know, they see you out there standing behind with these people in solidarity. Okay, he looks like me. I'm allowed to be a part of this, you know? So you would have to be kind of that trailblazer to say, look, hey, I'm here not to make this about myself. I understand that I benefit in ways in society that I don't even know to the extent how well I benefit from it. But I do know that I want to be here to help, you know? And that's what happens in keeping that mindset. Any other questions? What you got? Yeah, microphone.
Okay, so despite like all the, like, so when you were 13, 12, you had all this like pushback against being an intellectual. Like, what kept you going to get you to this point?
I would like to thank the Marine Corps for that. And it's not that the Marine Corps is advocating people read books, which they do, but it's not the kind that would make you one day a professor or a lawyer or a doctor or anything like that. When I got out of my community, well, first thing, I didn't want to be like some of the people in my family. And it's not that I looked down on them. It's just that I respected them enough to know that if I made the same mistakes that they made, that I wouldn't be honoring them, you know? And that was one thing that kind of kept me going. It's like, I can't be like my uncle or like my father or, you know, any of these people or my grandfather, because they wouldn't want me to be. So I'm like, I literally know what happens if I continue down this road. I literally have people that I love that have, they're the end result. This is what happens right here. So you want to be like me? Like, well, no. Good, I don't want you to be. So why would I go do that? It took me a while to figure that part out. But when I was in the military, I did pretty well on the ASVAB and I got a good job. If you don't know, the ASVAB determines what type of jobs are available for you. So I scored pretty high on the ASVAB and I basically had my pick of any job. And it's actually a pretty good time for me to talk about how I joined the military. So I went into the office, had recently broke up with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, so I can kind of thank her for this, because I was in like one of those, like, I hate the world, I'm going to leave and go off to war kind of deal. But anyway, so I went in there, and the recruiter was spouting off names, and he said Intel. And I immediately thought like some James Bond, like kicking in doors, because I'm, you know, Marines, Intel, juxtapose that together, and obviously I'm James Bond, right? Well, actually, I was more times than not. There were some times where we got to do some cool stuff, but when we weren't in Afghanistan, we were mostly behind computers with headsets on. But I was around a lot of smart people, a lot of people that read, and I was forced to be around these people, and I was forced to evaluate my way of life and what I thought was the right trajectory for me. And I was forced to. I'm already a pretty ambitious person, so seeing these people and them talking about their families and how it's so different from my family, the way I grew up here in America, and I'm trying to understand how can I achieve that level of success, of consistency that they have in their families. You know, I mean people who, my dad was a lawyer, his dad was a lawyer, and, you know, like the generational folks. And plus the Marine Corps attracts A-type personality. So just about everybody that joins the Marine Corps is a narcissist. To be quite honest with you, that's the reason we joined the Marine Corps, because they're the best. I don't want to be anything but the best, so I'm gonna join that, you know? So being around those people just kind of motivated me. And like, again, some of my best friends, they're at Columbia, Harvard, Brown, University of Chicago, some really, really smart people. But my struggle wasn't over then. I had just realized that I wanted to pursue something. ACC, Class of Casa Grande, actually is where I decided that I was just going to give my all to this being an intellectual thing, and just kind of embrace who I am fully. Before, I was reading books, and I was like, well, I'm going to be a quiet intellectual. I'm going to just be a person that reads a lot, but I'm never going to do anything with it because I don't want to step out, and Casa Grande kind of helped me with that. But yeah, that's what it was. So, anybody else? Don't be afraid. This is a safe place. And they can only see my face, so if you say anything that's kind of crazy, they only get my reaction. We good? All right, if you have any questions you want to ask me on camera, I'm going to be here for a little bit. You can ask me after then, and go for now. I appreciate you guys showing up. This is actually my first lecture. I hope I did well. I hope you guys learned some things. Thank you.